For a long time now, Apple has stood alone among the major computer and smartphone manufacturers in using their own operating systems developed in-house rather than licensing Windows or Android. So it's probably not super surprising that they have recently announced that they are going to start using their own processors in iMac and MacBooks. But after using Intel chips for the past 15 years, why are they making this change? And what exactly can we expect from Apple's attempt to strike out on their own? To answer, let's first look a bit into Apple's history, because this isn't the first time they have gone against the grain in terms of what kind of silicon lies at the heart of their computers. Prior to 2005, Apple used a series of processors branded as PowerPC, which was a non-x86 architecture that arose from a joint venture between Apple, IBM and Motorola as a way to counter the dominance of Intel-based PCs running on Windows. However, Apple made the switch to Intel because it was becoming more difficult for IBM and Motorola to manufacture chips that could compete with Intel in terms of performance. And of course, a lot of this came down to cost. You see, unlike Intel, who was primarily in the business of chip making and could crank out tons of CPUs very cost efficiently, Motorola and IBM had lots of other operations and simply couldn't operate their chip making at the same scale as Intel. Then you had the fact that Apple did not control as much of the home computer market, and IBM and Motorola didn't want to keep pouring money into making processors for a computer manufacturer that was still dwarfed by companies making Intel machines. This is especially true given that Apple was dividing up money they were spending on CPUs between the two companies, hurting both IBM and Motorola's bottom lines even more. Ironically, cost is once again a big factor in Apple's decision to transition away from Intel and put its own processor inside PCs. One analyst estimates that Apple could save between $100 to $150 for every system they build on their new CPUs. Although, given Apple's track record, I wouldn't necessarily expect them to pass the savings along to their fans. Of course, though, there are many other considerations that would have gone into this decision. One is that Apple was reportedly unhappy with Intel's quality control for some time. But even aside from that, Apple also seems to believe that they can significantly save on power consumption. Now, Intel obviously does have CPUs built for very low power applications, such as their Y series that go into laptops designed for longer battery life. But ARM architecture in Apple's chips could lead into even greater power savings. Unlike Intel's x86 architecture, ARM is an example of a reduced instruction set or RISC architecture, meaning that CPU instructions are intended to be executed in just one cycle as opposed to over multiple cycles. Oftentimes, the result of using RISC is greater power efficiency, meaning that ARM chips have been used extensively in tablets, smartphones, and even smartwatches, which need extended battery life as much as possible. But don't think that the lower power consumption automatically means lower performance. That old PowerPC architecture that we mentioned earlier that Apple used in its older desktop and laptops, those were actually RISC chips as well. And there are even supercomputers that use RISC. Not to mention that even Intel's modern x86 processors have an element of RISC computing packed into them. But it was hard not to notice Apple's announcement at WWDC was rather short on the specific details about the performance. While it's true that the A13 ARM chips found in iPhone 11 series are significantly ahead of the competing mobile products from Qualcomm, it isn't quite clear yet how Apple's new silicon will fare against Intel in desktop or laptop environment. Regardless, the new chips will at the very least allow both iOS and macOS programs to run natively side by side on the same machine, making things a lot easier not only for your average home user but also for developers who will no longer have to code for two different platforms. Apple is also providing tools to developers to port their x86 applications over to new Macs, though it remains to be seen how much performance will or won't suffer, especially for programs that will need emulation for the time being, which introduces the inherent performance overhead as it translates from x86 to ARM. So it looks like we'll have to be patient in order to find out exactly how Apple's homemade chips stack up to the competition, as this still apparently have plans to release new Intel-based Macs for 2 more years before switching to their own silicon completely. In any case, the longer battery life will be welcome, as well as being able to see your favorite actors on Instagram without having to open a web browser. So if you like this video, then hit the like button and also don't forget to subscribe.